connected consumer. Hi, my name is Chris White.
And I'm Rosie Alpino, and we're the hosts of Parks Associates podcast, The Connected Consumer.
This podcast is all about Parks Associates' data-driven market insights on emerging consumer technologies, products, and services. It features our talented analyst team and also industry leaders who bring new and innovative products to market.
Throughout this podcast, you'll get an inside look at the latest industry trends, focus on the connected consumer, home automation and security, energy management, connected health and independent living, and digital content and video services.
In this episode, we'll chat about IoT and climate change with our guest speaker, Rob Conant, Vice President of Software and Ecosystem for Infineon Technologies.
Rob has an extensive background on Internet of Things, smart energy, semiconductors, and connected products. So we're very excited to have him share his expertise today. Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Of course.
Yeah, so Rob, Infineon's stated mission is to make life easier, safer, and greener for the world and for consumers. And our research indicates that roughly half of the broadband households that we work with say being green is important to me. So this is obviously a subject that resonates with our audience, an important topic for us to study. So could you tell us a little more about the solutions you guys have going on with IoT in the energy space?
Yeah, sure. So Infineon is a big global semiconductor company. So we make a lot of the chips that power a lot of the products that are used both in the consumer space and the energy space and automotive also. So we supply across a bunch of different industries. And I've been in the IoT space for a long time, and so there's obviously a lot of different markets that contribute to climate change. And companies like Infineon are really kind of at the base of enabling innovation that can transform a bunch of different industries. And I'm excited to talk to you all about it today. As you said, one of our mission is to make life cleaner, greener, and safer for consumers, for people, and greener is a big part of that. The company really focuses a lot of attention on climate change, and that not only in our operations but also in the technology that we develop. A lot of it is really used across a bunch of different sectors to help reduce climate change.
That's great. So can you share a little bit more, in what areas is Infineon keeping consumers connected while also saving energy?
Yeah. So maybe, so it's both about saving energy, but also reducing greenhouse gases, reducing gas emissions. And, the way I was looking at the actual greenhouse gas emissions, it spans a bunch of different industrial segments and commercial segments, and we actually supply across all of them. So if you look at the global emissions, about 14% is transportation. A lot of that is road transportation. We're one of the biggest suppliers of semiconductors into electric vehicles, right? Which is really it will help us to transform, decarbonize the transportation sector. Another one you mentioned people's homes. So about 11% of greenhouse gases come from home energy use. And home energy use, a bunch of different categories related to that. But things like basically lighting, heating, refrigeration, those are cooling. Those are some of the dominant energy uses in the home. And we're one of the biggest suppliers of technology into the smart home companies. Some of the biggest appliance companies in the world use our technology. A lot of that's connectivity technology. A lot of that is compute technology. So we provide the compute capability for those companies making all those different kinds of appliances. And then we also provide a bunch of the power components themselves to help them make their products more efficient, and the software that kind of stitches all that together. So it's I think consumers want the comfort, they want the safety. Those things won't change. But what we do is we really help our customers, the appliance makers, make sure that is happening at the right time. So houses shouldn't be cooled when people aren't in the house, for example, and also so that they're as efficient as possible, so that as much of the energy that goes in is delivered to comfort for those customers.
Absolutely. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit towards, buildings and homes. So for the past 3 years, about 1/3 of broadband households have made energy saving home improvements each year. And so could you expand more on, your solutions in that area? Talk more about your CO2 sensors and smart buildings, and then how do they work to save energy, in addition to if you have any solutions for residential homes.
Yeah, sure. So commercial buildings are a big part of the energy consumption. Also, about almost 7% of carbon emissions come from commercial buildings. That's probably a lot less over the course of the past year. I don't know about you all, but I've been out of the office here, my home office, for a long time, so I've shifted a lot of energy consumption to residential. But that'll come back. The energy consumption in commercial buildings will come back, and those the companies that operate those buildings do want to reduce energy consumption, not only for economic reasons, but also to reduce carbon emissions. And the way to do that is to provide the right level of comfort, but to provide it in a smarter way. And so that really comes down to understanding where people are, understanding what level of cooling or airflow is needed, and then delivering that cooling or heating or airflow into the right place. And that's all about sensing, right? That's all about sensing, compute, in some cases AI, artificial intelligence, to be able to deliver the right heating or cooling or airflow in the right place. So one of the things that we're excited about is, you mentioned the CO2 sensors. So you can put cameras in places. People in general are a little bit concerned about the privacy aspects of that. And so we see a lot of companies that are more interested in using either radar for people counting, or another one that's actually even more effective is using CO2 sensors to see when people are in rooms. If they're not in the room, you don't need to cool the room. But in addition to that, with COVID, there's been a lot of interest in making sure that the airflow happens the right way inside those rooms. So when you have a lot of people in a room, maybe you need additional heating or cooling, but maybe you also need to have more airflow in that place just to keep the room safe for people. And so we're seeing a lot of activity in the smart building space to make those systems smarter, to deliver the right cooling and heating and airflow for people, but to use sensing to make that better than it has been in the past. We've all been in commercial buildings where it's clear the building just doesn't know we're there, right? Or doesn't know what the temperature is. It's a common frustration. And I'm happy to say that with the new technologies coming out, a lot of those problems are going to be solved.
Yeah, we're hearing too, a lot of people in the space as a reaction to COVID, using sensors like this to make sure that capacity is not meeting regulations in terms of the maximum people that are allowed to be in a certain space and things like that. And that's also kind of being moved from not just commercial but also to the multi-dwelling unit space, which is a big audience for us right now, and a big they're making moves in smart homes because more and more of smart home buyers are people who live in apartments and condos. And so use of sensors and stuff like this are starting to be important in common areas, such as like lobbies and also amenities like gyms, where they might have requirements like that. So that's really important technology that is kind of being used across a couple of different areas because of COVID. So it's really cool that you guys are involved in that space too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I'm excited about the adoption of those smart home technologies and multi-dwelling units, because a lot of people living in different kinds of apartment buildings are really interested in changing their own carbon footprint, right? Reducing their carbon footprint, but they don't have the ability to go solar, for example. It's not their choice.
Right.
And so they're kind of subject to the whims of the building owner in that area. But in terms of energy consumption, that is their choice. That is within their control. And those smart systems can help them, lower the shades to reduce the sun load of a house, right? To make sure that the apartment knows when they're there or when they're not, to save energy. And so it really empowers people to make those decisions for themselves and act on those decisions in an automated way that doesn't require them to be constantly fiddling with everything.
Right. And you guys have a refrigerator energy controller of some kind too, I believe. And that's actually a space that we're also watching very carefully, is this smart appliance space, because that's another area of control that everyone has. Well, actually, that's not true. In some states, people leave their refrigerators behind. Here in Texas, where we're located, people take all of their appliances out. So if you're a renter and you move into an apartment, you got to show up with your own fridge.
Oh, right.
It's a little
Yeah.
wild. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I mean, that kind of also goes along with a trend of people that have essentially DIY smart home products in rental spaces that they're carrying around with them. So,
Yeah.
I think it's a bummer if you have to carry your fridge around, but it does mean that it's a good idea to invest in a fridge that is going to have the features you want and have energy efficiency, like the stuff that you guys are offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that we talk to a lot of the big appliance manufacturers, spend time with them, on the refrigeration side, but cooking, cleaning, heating and cooling, and they're really, they've obviously innovated a lot over the years in terms of efficiency, but with adding connectivity into those products allows them to provide efficiency in really new ways. Before, the efficiency had to be something that was built in at the time of design. And so it was something that was like, you can make your motor more efficient. And we work with a lot of these guys to make their motors more efficient, or their power conversion more efficient. And there's a lot of improvements that they can make there and continue to. But operating the systems in an intelligent way is a huge part of energy efficiency. So not using energy when you don't have to, or not running the motor when you don't have to, is probably the best way to make something more efficient. But even down at the level of motor control, you'd be amazed at the innovations that are happening down at that layer to make those motors more efficient, to make them so that they're more reliable they can last longer. There's and that's all about distributing intelligence down into those devices. Over 50 years ago, it was all kind of wired together, right? And so now it's all microcontroller based, and it's moving from being kind of fixed microcontroller based to being dynamically adjusting, and that's going to really help with efficiency. And you do that on one fridge, it's not that big a deal, but you do it on many millions, and it has a big impact.
Right.
Absolutely.
I mean, I also think it's going to be a new differentiator in the way that Energy Star rating is very important to buyers. There's going to be some sort of new, I don't know how the point of sale are going to end up pitching this, but once they figure out how to message this a little better, getting across the idea that, well, it's actually your smart components that are doing it. It's not a matter of like quality of the device or design of the device brought like that happened in the factory. It's about the ongoing life of the device and how it's going to be learning and getting better, and how its connectivity is going to, help it be efficient. And like Rosie mentioned, we're seeing a lot of people saying that they're doing a lot of these actions proactively in their home, making sure that they're not running their dishwasher until it's full, or using cold water, when they're washing, adjusting their thermostat and this type of thing. And all of that stuff, if it can become automated, it can take out some of the kind of human error and take some of the burden off of us, like constantly worrying about our like greenness, while we're still trying to be green. Have some automation and some smart device makers and stuff helping us, like you guys are doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it should be, ideally, it would be a decision that we are able to make, and then that decision gets implemented for us by the technology, rather than us having to constantly work to implement those decisions. So that smart technology really is I think going to have a big impact in that way.
Absolutely.
All right, now you mentioned. Oh,
sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say he brought up electric vehicles a couple of times. That's something I'm super interested in right now. We had a presentation recently about it at our recent CES, and we also have some reports coming out in 2022. So I've been thinking about this, researching this stuff a lot. So the two places that I see that are really exciting is, so you guys are in the EV space. I think the boom is coming. So I want you to tell me that you guys believe it too, and give us proof so that I don't feel like I'm just claiming this, telling everyone, again, being in Texas, walking around telling people that EVs are going to be a big thing feels a little isolating. But then the other piece is, the actual electricity that goes into the vehicles needs to be clean, or else the whole point of an EV, doesn't make any sense. It needs to be zero emission on the production side, and not just on the vehicle side. So that's something you guys are a little involved in too. Can you talk about how you guys are involved in the production of clean electricity that's going to be powering our electric vehicles in the future?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think that's a super exciting space, and like I said, that's a big part of the overall energy consumption. So almost 12% or the greenhouse gas emissions, almost 12% globally are from vehicles, from road traffic, and that. Yeah, so inherently switching that from burning in the car as it's going down the road to running on electricity, just does shift the emissions from just being distributed to being centralized. That's true. Electric vehicles are coming, right? That is happening in a massive way. We work with many of the big automakers. We're one of the biggest suppliers in the auto industry. And these companies, many of these companies are intending to introduce a lot of new electric vehicles. It takes them years to introduce new models, and so we're often working with them on products, their new vehicles that'll come out in a few years, and across the board, tremendous number of new models that will be electric vehicles over the course of the next few years. It's hard to see that now. If you walk down, look at a bunch of car dealerships, you won't see it today. But boy, being in the industry, you see it. It's there. It's happening at massive scale. So you will be proven right on that one, even in Texas.
Great.
But your point about the energy generation is an important one. If someone I know said that, oh, you're going to move from having a gasoline powered car to having a coal powered car. That's a reasonable way to look at it if all your energy is coming from coal. The good news on that is in a lot of places, including California, it actually is less expensive to get electricity from solar than it is from coal today. And that's happening in many states across this country and many places in the world. It's been true in Hawaii for a long time. Because they don't have any coal-fired power plants, but so it's like diesel, which is even worse. So the economic drivers for the adoption of solar are going to move more and more towards solar. And solar is quite a bit different from coal in that it's an upfront capital cost, but then there's no ongoing fuel costs. And so it's like, it's a little bit. I've been in the software industry for a long time. It's a little bit like the SaaS software business. Every year you're building on the last year, and that creates an exponential curve. Whereas, so every time someone else deploys solar, that is a reduction. That it builds on itself. So every year that will go up. The number never goes down. People don't have to make that decision every year. They make it once, and it will deliver for them for 20 years. So you're going to see more and more people using solar to power their cars, and that actually, that change in the energy mix will help to reduce the greenhouse gases, not only for transportation, but also for homes. So cooling in the home, if it's driven by solar, is not nearly as big a deal as if it's driven by coal. And so that solar transformation is actually will impact the greenhouse gas in a lot of different ways. Of course, the other thing that's happening in the automotive industry is the movement towards vehicles, self-driving vehicles, right? That these driver assistance systems are becoming more and more important, and that as that happens over time, I think you'll also see more efficiency from vehicles. Being able to drive closer together, being able to be smaller. A tremendous amount of the size and cost of a vehicle is related to the safety of the vehicle. You have to drive around in a 2,000-pound box of metal because you might run into somebody else at 70 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to run into somebody else at 70 miles an hour, maybe you don't need 2,000 pounds of metal. And so you're going to see a real transformation in the transportation space, in addition to electrification, because of these self-driving features of the ADAS features in the cars. So there's a lot of work that's going on. It takes years for these things to actually bubble up and be used in a big way by consumers. But us being down providing the underlying technology, there's a tremendous amount of change that's happening at that layer that's going to feed those higher layers that people, consumers like us, are going to see in the market over the course of the next few years.
Yeah, I think that's interesting that you talk about in terms of driving closer together and things like that, because that's something I've been thinking about a lot is shipping. So we saw Amazon announce that they're going to do last mile delivery in Rivians down the road. So that's going to be big electric trucks that our Amazon delivery guys are driving around. But also thinking about autonomous tractor trailers. It could be a different form factor, to your point, if you don't have to have a person, but it also can drive at night when the roads are going to be less congested. There's all sorts of advantages in terms of social good that can come from that type of thing. Of course, we don't want to use trucks forever in terms of our shipping. Probably we're going to have to come up with other solutions, but in the near term, having commercial vehicles that are electric is going to be really interesting. And then also that's going to impact the charging network, right? When you have chargers to support commercial, then they're going to be available to consumers. And we see, consumers having a lot of range anxiety and concerns about the charger network. So if, shipping companies start building big charging stations and, EV drivers can kind of take advantage of that infrastructure, that could make this whole thing happen. And it's great that you guys are kind of going to be involved in all that. There's so much opportunity for all those components. So I don't know if is there anything else we need to be mentioning about?
I think that's an interesting topic. You drive around a city, like I live out here in Silicon Valley, drive around a city, there are gas stations all over the place, right? That's a normal thing that we see. And that whole thing is going to be totally transformed over the course of the next 20 years as more and more vehicles are electric vehicles. That's going to free up space in our cities. It's going to change the way we travel. There are going to be a lot of changes that come from that echo down from the electrification of transportation.
Yeah, I'm from Florida, and there's tons of Wawa gas stations, and they have so many EV chargers now. So hopefully they'll migrate their way over to Texas.
They'll make it there. One other area that I think is really cool that we haven't touched on is there's another element of greenhouse gas emissions that come from burning forests and forest reductions, and that's an area that a lot of people, including me, feel concerned about. That's a change that's happening in the world, and we don't normally think about that as greenhouse gases, but that deforestation is a really big part of it. It's almost as much as commercial buildings in terms of the total contribution to greenhouse gases. And so one of the things we're excited about is there's an organization that I'm a part of called Rainforest Connection that uses the IoT to monitor what's happening in the rainforest. So they put out distributed microphones and distributed sensors. They deploy them in the rainforest. They're all over the world, Costa Rica and Brazil and Sumatra, and they actually use artificial intelligence to listen to the sounds and decompose the sounds. And they can decompose them and say, hey, there's a monkey, here's a parrot, here's some insect. But they can also say, there's a chainsaw. There's a chainsaw that just started a mile away. And then they provide notifications to the rangers who go out and enforce the rules to get them to stop the illegal logging. And it's really cool because it's a similar. It's similar to the smart home in a way. They're basically using AI and distributed intelligence to be able to make things more efficient. In this case, it's the enforcement of the logging rules, and that can have a huge impact. Getting better at that can also have a huge impact on greenhouse gas emissions. And so I think they'll be over time they'll be using more and more of the Infineon technology because they're very aligned with Infineon's mission. But distributing those sensors, we are a big provider of microphones and AI technology and compute technology. We're big supporters of projects like that, and as one of the biggest supplier into the IoT space. we see that as very well aligned with our mission. So that's another set of projects that I'm pretty excited about.
Yeah, we talk about that a lot in the home security space, like the use of audio analytics to supplement what's existing video content. So using things like, let's try and use a smart speaker or any device that has a mic to detect the sound of breaking glass, and use some computing on the edge there to determine that that's a break-in. So that's really cool. Like I hadn't thought of the idea of using it like for law enforcement in the type of way that you're thinking. Those laws, you know. So security for our rainforest is also very important, obviously, for the survival. But something that comes up a lot when we start talking about audio analytics and video analytics is this issue of data security. So you guys are collecting tons of data with your sensors. So can you talk a little bit about that data security issue?
Yeah, sure. So that obviously it's hugely important. You know, we are a global company operating in a bunch of different domains, jurisdictions. So our headquarters is in Germany. You know, and in Europe, I think there's a real focus on privacy that is beyond what we feel in the United States.
We've given up over here, I feel like, right?
Yeah, it does feel like that sometimes. But you know, our customers. So I have a particular interest in this, frankly, because the way I came into Infineon is I started a company that was really based on collecting data around connected products to make those connected products better. And so we collect hundreds of millions of data points per day on things like Wi-Fi connectivity for consumer electronics products, and find all sorts of problems, right? There are all sorts of problems in these products that you can see once you have the data. It's totally fascinating. We'll have another conversation about that at some point. But but in collecting that data, you know, we work with a bunch of the big consumer electronics companies because we're really collecting it on their behalf. They have the agreement with the customer about what they collect. And I got to say, you know, companies are quite rigorous about ensuring that they have the customers opt in, ensuring that it's clear how they're going to use the data, what they're going to use the data for. You know, when we do this, we probably spend more time talking about data usage and privacy in the contract than anything else. So it's a super important thing for a lot of companies, and for Infineon as well, right? So we really pay a lot of attention to the consumer privacy. You're making sure that the data is anonymized and aggregated, so it can't be tracked back to any people. Making sure that we're not collecting any personally identifiable information. So there's a real strong effort around that, and I think it's important as an industry that we do that, right? That we do that well. We can't pretend to do it and betray the trust of our customers. We really need to do it well, and we need to make sure that customers understand that we're doing it well, because otherwise they'll shy away from using these things, and then we don't achieve these goals of reduction of emissions, right? And so it's important that we keep talking about that. And I know you all have done a lot of work on that area, and that's something that we talk a lot about inside Infineon, and we appreciate the work you guys have done.
It's true. We got a big report coming out on data privacy, so shout out, everyone, keep an eye out for that. So speaking of what's coming up next for our organizations, now we're recording here in October, and we're going to be putting out this podcast in maybe mid-October, and you guys have a big event coming up. So what's next for you guys? How can listeners join in? Yeah,
we do. As part of, I joined Infineon through their acquisition of Cypress, and this is my first time at this event from Infineon. But we do a big event in Silicon Valley every year called October Tech. So it's bringing the joy of Oktoberfest into Silicon Valley. Unfortunately, it's all virtual, so that there's no way to serve virtual beer. So people are going to have to be at their home. But it's still going to be a great event. We're really excited about some of the content. In fact, we've got Rainforest Connection. They'll be talking about this, the AI detection using IoT for rainforest protection, which is super interesting. Really compelling story and vision of what they're doing. We've got some other great speakers at that event, and we've also have a couple of things that I think are interesting. Some news that will be interesting for a lot of your audience. We're big in the smart home. There's a lot happening in the smart home, and we've got a big announcement coming up that we're going to share at October Tech. So we're excited about that. And people can find us everyone's welcome to attend. Normally, this is quite an exclusive event. We only bring in 300 of our top customers from around the United States to participate in this event. But this year, because it's virtual, we've decided that we will open it up to everybody, and so everybody can participate. No beer, but more people.
That's
Well, no
great.
beer you're providing. Everyone can still
They have their own.
still do it at home.
That's right. And I'll still have my beer. So
Nice.
Great. Yeah, we'll make sure to add that to the description box on our website, so our listeners can join. Yes, absolutely. So please tell our audience where and how to follow your work and all of Infineon's latest solutions.
So you can follow me at on LinkedIn. I'm as you mentioned, I'm very interested in IoT and interested in the energy segment, and so I'm you'll see a lot of news coming out of there. But Infineon is also doing a ton in this area. So in addition to our website, you can also follow us on LinkedIn. We've got a bunch of new announcements that are coming out there. You can find links to October Tech there, and we do events all the time for our customers, and it's a great way to learn about what's going to happen in the industry. Not only this year, but also in the upcoming years, because what we're doing at their lower levels is really feeding into the change in the industry.
Amazing. Yes, make sure to check them out at www.infineon.com. Rob, thank you so much for sharing all of these amazing insights and being with us today.
My pleasure. It's great to talk to you both. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Rosie.
All right, connected consumers, thanks for tuning in today. Please make sure you look out for our next episode. We'll be covering MDUs, that's multi-dwelling units. We talked about it a little bit in this episode, and we're going to keep bringing it up because it's a major growth topic. Another major growth topic is connected health. That's something we're going to be talking about in an episode coming up soon. So keep your eye out for that as well.
Yes, excited to share all of the new things we have going on at Parks Associates. And as always, we want your feedback. So please feel free to leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tweet at Parks Associates. You can tweet at Rosie Melly U. You can tweet at Chris. What's your Twitter handle, Chris?
I'm C White Insights.
C White Insights. Yes, check Chris out. And then, let us know what you think and what you'd like to hear next.
The Connected Consumer.